Hey, how's it going? And today I wanted to talk a little bit about root motion because I just did a tutorial about how to import a Mixamo character with the root bone. And the question may come up, well, what is root motion anyway? What do we need it for? What is it? You're all familiar with this. If I hit play, we have a third-person player character, and it looks like the character's running around, right? But as one person has described this as smoke and mirrors, right? This is an illusion. This is all creating an illusion. So what's really happening here, there's two levels going on. There is the controller movement, and then there is the animation. So there's two levels going on here. A lot of the complexity that you see in animation is trying to get the animation to match what the controller is doing. So if we come into the blueprint third person, we can see this capsule component here, right? This capsule is really for handling collisions. This capsule is driven by the player controller, which is this invisible force in the scene that it's actually has a character movement component as well, but it allows us to use our mouse control and keyboard to move the controller through the game. And sometimes if it's a pawn, it can fly all over anywhere in the game. If it's a character movement component, it's grounded, it stays on the ground, but it can move. So what we can do is if I go to the mesh, you'll see now it's another layer here. So this is this is one layer of the animation. The main layer, you could say in a way, it's the player controller moving the capsule through 3D space, and it can be grounded or it can be flying through the air. It's our primary way of going through 3D space is the controller. But then what we do is we put a mesh here inside of that capsule, basically parent them to each other. It's parented to the capsule. It's a child of, in essence, of the capsule, so it goes wherever the capsule goes. And the goal is to make the animation match the general animation of what the capsule is doing. So when the capsule turns, this needs to turn. When the capsule is moving fast, this animation needs to move fast. When this capsule is moving slow, this animation needs to move slow. So it's this carefully choreographed interchange between what the capsule is doing and what the animation is doing. And that's where all the complexity comes from. So if I come over here right now with the mesh selected, and let's just say I turn off its animation, right? I go into custom mode. I'm essentially turning off this layer of animation, right? So now I come in and I hit play, what happens? What you're seeing here is what's really happening. This is the player controller, and it's moving the capsule around. So like I hit a wall, right? I can't go through. So this is the true animation of what's really happening in our game. This is our motion. This is our, well, you want to call it animation, but it's our movement within 3D space, right? And as you can see, it's grounded to the ground. It's not flying, it's stuck to the ground by the way it's set up. So if I hit escape and I come back in here then, and then I bring that animation back, right? I use an animation blueprint and bring it back, compile and save, and I hit play. It's the same thing, but now the capsule's still moving, but with this animation inside of it, it looks like I'm running. It's still the capsule and the controller that are primarily moving this through 3D space. This animation is really an illusion. It's the capsule moving, but the animation looks like it's self-propelling itself, but it's not. Now I want to show you one more thing is let's talk now about root motion. And fortunately in the content examples, if you come into the animation basics in the content examples, and it's on the very first level called animation basics. So let's go in here and let's make this full screen too. And let's just talk a little bit about root motion then, which is one of the very first examples here. And this is the best explanation I've seen of what root motion is. Root motion is a term that describes whether the root bone has animation baked into it. Now some skeletal rigs, like the Mixamo one, doesn't even have a root bone, right? So it doesn't have root motion because there's not even a bone to bake animation into. When we add the root bone to our Mixamo rig and bring it into Unreal, then we have a root bone, and then we can apply root motion, which is baking motion into it, right? So you see on the one on the left has no root motion. It's locked in place. And then you can see the one on the right has root motion, and basically it goes where root motion is really ideal for when you have, you know how you can have a character, there's basically two kinds of animations. You can have an in-place animation, and then you can have an out-of-place animation where the character is covering distance. Like if someone's in idle mode, root motion is really not needed because they're not moving anywhere, they're just standing in place. If the character is moving, you probably do need root motion. So here's a perfect example of it right here, the best example that I've seen of root motion right here. So I'll just read it straight. It says, if an animation has root motion, the movement of the root is used by the movement component. This way the movement and the capsule can react to collision and physics while moving in the way the animation was authored. If the character needs to perform an animation with complex movement such as dodge or react, root motion is a great way to retrieve precise movement with no foot sliding. If you don't have a root bone, you can't have root motion, and the root bone is what you can tie the capsule to so that if the character moves out of place, the capsule, the collision capsule, can go with them. If you don't have a root bone, well, here we have a root bone, but it's not, there's no motion enabled, but it would be the same as if you didn't have a root bone, because the person is just moving, but then they have no collision capsule and would go right through walls and things like that. So anyway, this was just a quick look at root motion. I was explaining how to import a Mixamo character with a root bone so that you could have root motion, but then I realized I didn't really explain what root motion was and why you would need it in the first place. So the bottom line is you do want to add that root bone to your Mixamo characters. If you don't, you're going to have this problem of no root motion because you're not going to have a root bone, and then you're not going to have appropriate collisions when the character has a complex animation or goes out of place. So anyway, take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.